All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on on a Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. Spent a lot of time with football this weekend. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. Just because I live in the state of Tennessee, I just saw this on Twitter, and we talked about it on Friday. Yesterday was the first day of live sports betting in the state of Tennessee, and from DraftKings, the most bet on teams in Tennessee on the first day of mobile sports betting. This is by number of bets. So on NFL Sunday, it was the Titans. That makes a lot of sense. The Super Bowl, also the Titans. The Titans don't have a good enough defense, as we learned against the Bengals this weekend. They don't have a good enough defense to win a Super Bowl. College football playoff title, Alabama. That's just a swing and a miss. NBA title, Warriors with the Grizzlies #2. College basketball title, the Vols. Tennessee's going to be good this year. I don't know if national championship good is what they're going to be. They might be the best team in the SEC, though. And then the Braves in the World Series, which, of course, that's the closest. So depending on where you live in Tennessee, from where I am, the closest is the Cardinals up in St. Louis. But if you live in East Tennessee or even Middle Tennessee, the closest is definitely the Braves, and I would think is the most popular team in this state. But yeah, it's interesting. Those are, first of all, the Titans just laid an absolute egg. There was a DraftKings odds boost for people in Tennessee. If all they had to do was score a touchdown, and you had plus 100 odds for them to score a touchdown, and of course that hit, but they didn't hit on much more than that. Yesterday against the Bengals, 31-20 lost the Titans. Ryan Tannehill 18-30. Derrick Henry 18 rushes for 112 yards and a touchdown. But Joe Burrow threw a couple touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill threw an interception, and it was just it was not a good look for the Titans. I mean, they didn't really have it the entire game, and never really brought it back. And I think as I just mentioned, you can't win a Super Bowl with the defense that the Titans have. I read something today that there's a chance that Stephon Gilmore, reigning Defensive Player of the Year, who plays for the Patriots, read a headline about him, the possibility of him going to Tennessee, and that would certainly help. But it would be they would certainly have to give up quite a bit for a player of that caliber, and they seriously need to do something on that side of the football if they want, because they didn't, there wasn't really it wasn't really a horrible day, all things considered. The Bengals were 10 for 15 on third down conversions. 10 for 15. They couldn't get them off the field. It was that bad. The Titans had more total yards, more yards per play. You didn't have more passing yards, but they almost doubled rushing yards. But they gave up 7 penalties. They had a turnover, and the Bengals dominated the time of possession. And the Titans even got a defensive and special teams touchdown, and still lost 31-20. It was not a great day for the Titans, and they just really never had control of that football game. Let's talk about college football here for a minute, and then we'll get into some more of the NFL in the next segment. But Clemson got a scare, But listen, it was not Uwagalele that was the issue. 342, 2 touchdowns, 30 of 41 passing. He also had 25 yards rushing with a 30-yard touchdown run on a nice QB option. Took it, stuck it into Travis Etienne's gut and then took it away from him. And he had a wide open lane. He could drive a truck through the lane that he had to the end zone. They were down 28-13 at halftime. And Boston College came out swinging, and then they just scored 21 unanswered in the second quarter, in the second half, excuse me. Boston College not getting a point on the board in the second half. Travis Etienne is legit. 20 carries, 84 yards, 1 touchdown. He also caught 7 passes for 140 yards and a touchdown. He is, if I was starting my first game ever as a true freshman at quarterback, there are very few players that I'd like to have behind me in the backfield and as a weapon at my disposal. Then Etienne, he was phenomenal. And Clemson's defense really locked down in the second half, because that was the issue after the first half, is that Boston College just was doing whatever they wanted on the offensive end. Like I just put out the scores for you, the stats for you. DJ was great, and a couple things here. One, it must be, Clemson has turned into quarterback U at this point. Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number 1 overall pick. So you get guys like DJ, the number 1 pro-style quarterback in the class, and the number 10 player in the country, the class of 2020, joining your team. That's what you're going to get. And it's clear that Clemson's going to be in good hands after Trevor Lawrence and it leaves, assuming that's after this season, assuming. And even they'll be in even better hands if he doesn't leave until after his senior season. And you've got DJ, who spent even more time learning from Trevor Lawrence, learning that system, and then stepping in as a junior. Hopefully that wouldn't mean he'd transfer. That would suck for Dabo, and because I'm sure he came under the assumption that he would sit behind Trevor Lawrence for a year and then get his turn to be the starting quarterback of the Tigers. But I'm actually going to dive deeper into this week over for 110sportsmedia.com. I am intrigued. I want to take a look at that game a little bit closer and really try to dive into who he is as a passer, as a quarterback, and as we go into this Notre Dame game, because as we learned basically right after the Clemson game in the post-game presser with Dabo Swinney, Trevor Lawrence won't be far enough along in the protocol process, the ACC protocol process, to get Trevor Lawrence back onto the field prior to the beginning of, prior to that Notre Dame game. And so he's not going to be available to play, which makes this really, really intriguing because, first of all, it's not a foregone conclusion that Notre Dame wins this game by any stretch of the imagination. Notre Dame has been good, really good recently meaning the last several years, and they just can't beat the best of the best. They're that one win away kind of deal, and they just haven't been able to get it done consistently against top talent. So first of all, it's not a given by any stretch of the imagination. The other thing here is that DJ's good, man, and clearly, and it's Boston College, I get that, but 30-41 for 342, 2 touchdowns, and then a rushing touchdown, regardless of who you're playing against at the Division I level, is big time. And I want to get into that and really look at DJ, really look at the Notre Dame defense, and see where DJ might be able to have some success and things of that nature. But so be on the lookout for a story of that nature over at 110sportsmedia.com in the next few days or so. And the other part of this, I'm so intrigued to see how this game is how Clemson is treated if they lose this game to Notre Dame. Because this is the first really good look we're going to get at really in in sports in this country in general. This will be if Notre Dame beats Clemson, and it's the type of game where Clemson's not able to score the ball, and so the idea is Trevor Lawrence not being there really hurts the Tigers. Like, clearly this is one of the, if not the best football team in the country when Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback. If they lose this game at Notre Dame, I'm really intrigued as to how Clemson gets treated by the College Football Playoff Committee, by the sports media outlets in general, because I think it's not a head scratcher, but it could go several different ways, right? They could be looked at as a team that's no longer the best team in the country. They could be looked at as a team that runs the table completely when Trevor Lawrence comes back. It's not the end of their season from winning a national championship perspective if they lose to Notre Dame, but I'm curious to see how this changes the complexion of Clemson if they lose this game. Does it change it at all? And what's the consensus or the thought on how this team should be treated if they lose a game because the best player in college football can't play due to his COVID diagnosis? And to be clear, I've got zero issue with him missing this game. Follow the protocol. I'm all for that, really am. It's just going to be really intriguing to see how this changes the conversation around Clemson, because it might, and I'm really curious to see how it does. A couple other things: Ohio State gets out to a 21-6 lead at halftime, just sort of waltzes to a win. Pretty much exactly. And let's talk about the Big Ten for a second, man. Here are the Big Ten standings right now. You ready for this? Why did it take me to the... I don't want all conferences. I want the Big Ten. Thank you. The Big Ten East, going from bottom to top. In the cellar of the Big Ten East, Penn State Nittany Lions, followed by the number 23 Michigan Wolverines at 1-1. The Maryland Terrapins 1-1. Michigan State 1-1. Rutgers 1-1. Ohio State 2-0, and then tied at the top of the conference, the Indiana Hoosiers 2-0. After upsetting Penn State at home, they get a 27-31 win against Rutgers. They're for real. There's more reason to be excited about Indiana football right now than Indiana basketball, which is laugh out loud funny. They have some great pieces over there. Trace Jackson Davis is going to be awesome. But there's a lot of hype around that football program right now. It's been moving in the right direction for several years now. And the last thing I would expect is that Indiana... Well, a couple of things. That Michigan would have lost at home to Michigan State. That Penn State would be 0-2, and that Indiana would be 2-0. would have called you crazy. And then on the other side of things, talk about even crazier. Minnesota and Iowa, both 0-2. Illinois, also 0-2. Nebraska, 0-1. Of course, they didn't play. Wisconsin, 1-0, and they're, maybe one of the other best teams. I mean, that's the best team in the Big Ten West. Best team in the Big Ten West, and they're without their starting quarterback for 21 days because of his COVID test. And then you've got Purdue at 2-0 and Northwestern at 2-0, who is a 64-23 points differential in their first two games. They were down 17-0 at one point. They come back and beat Iowa 21-20. The Big Ten football is just crazy looking. Crazily, and it would have looked a lot. It would have looked a lot more right if Michigan beats Michigan State, and then you just have Michigan, Ohio State at the top of the Big Ten East. And honestly, I was on this podcast that talked about it on the bonfire that, Michigan has a quarterback in Joe Milton, 32 for 51, 300 yards passing, no touchdowns. He certainly has a chance to make that offense more dynamic than it has been in a long time. But I was wrong. They really, really struggled on the offensive end yesterday or 2 days ago, and they lost to a Michigan State team that is just not good, man. That's not a good football team. But they were able to take Michigan out, and I don't know what you're supposed to do if you're Michigan with Harbaugh. I really don't. I've run out of excuses for him. I genuinely don't know what to do with Harbaugh now. Like, you just can't lose to Michigan State at home. The one thing that Michigan has consistently done is lose to Ohio State, and otherwise they've been pretty good. But now you're losing at home to Michigan State. I mean, the clock is ticking on Jim Harbaugh's future. It is, and it'll be interesting to see how he's dealt with, and it dealt with how he's treated. Clearly, Michigan fans are fed up. With good reason. But it'll be really interesting to see how his future is approached. I find it hard to believe that they'll fire him now. Meaning now meaning in season. But I mean, if they got to go at IU next. And IU's a good football team, and Indiana's not an easy place to play. And then, then they have to play Wisconsin. I mean, let's see, the 14th, I think that would be 21 days from, if not, it'd be really close, 21 days to wait for when Wisconsin's starting quarterback tested positive for COVID-19. So they could be closer to full strength. The point being is that there's a real chance that they are 1-3. After that, putting 49 on the board at Minnesota had me thinking differently about this Michigan team. Clearly, I was wrong, and clearly Harbaugh needs to. You got to show him something. You know what I mean? Alabama beat Mississippi State 41-0, snooze fest. Notre Dame 31-13 against Georgia Tech. Georgia just doesn't have the offense. I mean, 14 points they put up on Kentucky. 14. Stetson Bennett completed 9 passes. Zamir White, 26 rushes, 136 yards. They just don't have the offense to beat any good football teams, especially not in a year when Alabama's offense is so good. They just don't have a chance to get out of that conference, and into the college football playoff. The Big 12 is officially irrelevant. Officially, with Texas going into Oklahoma State Stadium and beating them 41-34. It made no sense that they were in that game. Just absolutely no sense. Let me show you what I mean. Let me tell you what I mean. Texas was 2 for 15 in third down conversions. They had almost 300. They had 250 less yards of total offense. Oklahoma State threw for 400 yards, rushed for another 130. Texas had 13 penalties for 142 yards, but Texas forced 4 turnovers. Spencer Sanders, quarterback for Oklahoma State, 3 fumbles, all 3 were lost. Just too many mistakes. They shouldn't, and there was an interception as well that was returned for 41 yards. There was a kick return touchdown for Texas. It's just, you can't let those things happen. Oklahoma State should have never been in jeopardy to lose this game, and they lose at home. When they dominated, they just kept kicking themselves in the foot. The Big 12 is officially irrelevant. Everyone's lost a game, at least one game. The top of the conference at this point is Iowa State, which doesn't scare anybody. Doesn't scare anybody. Oklahoma has righted the ship a little bit, but that's about all you can say about it. But that means they're 3-2. I mean, it's Iowa State and Kansas State at the top. The Oklahoma State now 3-1, and then everybody else has at least 2 losses. Bad. And so they're officially irrelevant. Oklahoma State being their only shot left at being a college football playoff participant, and they're just nobody's even going to sniff it really. Cincinnati dominated the Tigers. Memphis's defense is just horrible, and they got to do something about it. They're never going to win on the road with the defense that is that bad. And Coastal Carolina, America's football team, 51-0. They're now 6-0, and Oklahoma put up 62 on Texas Tech. But that's what happened in college football. Coming up next, we're going to talk some NFL. Got a couple things to talk about on that side of things, but we'll do that next on the JMULL Show. 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Monday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us, making us a part of your day. First day of NFL betting went decent. Now, we hit on the Titans scoring a touchdown. That was the key one. And but now that I think about it, other than that, not a whole lot went right. We still left still in the positive pretty easily. But it's crazy how close the odds makers get on such a consistent basis. I mean, the Bills Pats was a 24-21. The line was 4, and the Bills had a shot to on the possession where they took the lead with a field goal. They had a chance to score, and so they score and they cover, or they don't score or they kick a field goal and they don't cover. And that's what it came down to. At that point, I'm rooting for Cam Newton and to lead the Patriots down and kick a field goal so we can go to overtime and that maybe the Bills can score a touchdown and win the game. But it was making me laugh just how close they always are. Parlay on the late games. There was a moment where I thought all of them were going to hit, and then we got to the point where half of them didn't. The Chargers were in control of that football game and then managed to choke, losing 31-30 to the Broncos. The Bears and Saints. The Bears came back, man. That was for an offense that doesn't move the ball well at all. To score 10 points like that when you really needed to and force overtime was impressive, but they end up losing that game. The Seahawks, 37-27. Russell Wilson coming back strong after that, after the loss that the Seahawks had to the Cardinals, 261, 4 touchdowns. DK Metcalf, 12 receptions, 161 yards, 2 touchdowns. In the first 8 minutes of the game, he had 5 catches for 100 yards and that 46-yard touchdown pass. That was the first score of the game. He's absolutely ridiculous, but the Seahawks back in the groove of things, and certainly far and away in control of that division in the NFC West. And now we're in a situation where we got in almost every single division. We have teams that are in control. I mean, the Bills are in control in the AFC East. They win that game 6-2. The Dolphins at 4-3 are the next closest team after Pittsburgh wins in Baltimore. They're now 7-0 and 2 games ahead of the Ravens, who are 5-2. The Titans, they can't lose games like that to the Bengals, man. Now the Colts 5-2, along with them the Texans and Jaguars 1-6 each. So those two teams are 5-2, and they still have 2 games to play against each other. The Colts play the Ravens next week, but then they go Titans, Packers, Titans. That's a tough 3-game stretch. But that is very much up for grabs. And the Titans losing a game that they shouldn't have lost. And now we find ourselves in a position where, they play the Bears, Colts, Ravens, Colts. That's not easy either. 2 of those games coming at home, 2 of those games away. The Chiefs in control of the AFC West. The Eagles in control of the NFC East. It's Washington, the Washington football team, and the Cowboys both have 2 wins, but the Eagles at 3-4-1 are now completely in control there. The Packers are 5-2. The Bears only half a game back after losing to the Saints, but I just have a hard time believing in the Bears. I just have a really hard time believing in them. If I'm being honest with you, they just can't. They have such a hard time scoring the football. And a team like the Packers, they just seem to they are good this year. The Saints and Bucks are 5-2, tied at the top of the NFC South. But with that being said, the Bucks get to play the Giants tonight, and I'm assuming that that'll be quite an easy win for Tom Brady and the Bucks. And then the Seahawks, like I said, 6-1. If they just hold on, if they're not aiding and abetting their own loss last week, then they're completely in control of that conference. But still 6-1. The Cardinals coming up on their schedule. They have to play the Dolphins, which is not an easy game right now. The Bills, Seahawks, Patriots, Rams, Giants, Eagles, Niners, Rams. Certainly not easy, and certainly not easy for a young quarterback like Kyler Murray to stay toe-to-toe with Russell Wilson and that Seahawks team. But of course he did it in one game, and we've talked about him on the pod. We talked about him last week, and I like what he's doing for the Cardinals. But the NFC, I mean, both conferences, there are multiple teams that I like to win both conferences. You know, in the NFC, there's definitely more teams. The Packers, the Bucks, the Seahawks. Throw the Saints in there if you'd like to. And then in the AFC, it's just the Steelers and the Chiefs right now. Those are certainly my teams in the AFC right now. But looking at these games individually, the Raiders holding the Browns to 6 points. I saw in multiple places that that was a good one to jump on. I didn't actually end up jumping on it, but that ended up working out the way that some people thought it would. Patrick Mahomes just really doing illegal things to just the poor Jets. 31 of 42, 416 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's a disgusting stat line. And that New York team is just really bad. The Bucks Giants play tonight. That one will be. There are reasons that one could be interesting. It probably won't be interesting. The line on that one is pretty ridiculous, I think, at this point. The Bucks being favored by 12.5 right now. Maybe we'll just hammer the over and that's what we'll do there. But yeah, like I said, a pretty predictable week ultimately in the NFL, and apart from the Packers losing to the Vikings, the Browns, no one really has faith in them. The Dolphins are playing good football right now. But yeah, coming up next, we'll do some FYI. Get out of here on a Monday. You're watching the JMULL Show, 110sportsmedia.com. for your information. And this is the only for your information today. Please go vote. Please. Let your voice be heard. Exercise that privilege to do so. It's really important that we take advantage of that right to do so. And so please vote tomorrow if you haven't already. And I'm sure we'll get through the next couple of days. On Wednesday, who knows what there will be to talk about. I intend to talk about whatever happens in the next 2 days on Wednesday. So I'd appreciate you if you stop by. I think it's really important to do so. So we'll do that on Monday. Tomorrow, Touchline Talk with Josh Doring, 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Chris Brown Around the Bases at 1 p.m. Eastern, and then I'll be back on Wednesday, of course, per usual, 11 a.m. Eastern. Until then, take care. Please be safe, and I'll see you on Wednesday.